So the title of the presentation is Application Widgets with AngularJS. And this is exactly what I said before. So usually we talk about single page apps when we develop with Angular, right? We have one page, one index.html, and in there we have our ng app on the body, and that's all Angular, right? But this is not always the case for a website, right? We have applications, then we have websites. They have some kind of application stuff like Airbnb and all these kind of websites. They're a little bit content driven, but also application driven. So I like to see these two worlds something like this. So we have, on one side, we have a pure content driven website, which is a website with a lot of levels in the navigation, in the information architecture. And you have loads of text and loads of pictures, and it's really a content driven thing, right? And you have strong SEO requirements because everything needs to be indexed and all this, and tons of pages and all this. And on the other side, you have web applications. And web applications, they have really another nature, right? They provide less content, but the content is very dynamic. They have tons of interaction. You can interact with the application, and they have different states, and you can drag and drop things around. And they're less SEO relevant, right? Because usually you are locked in when you use the app, or it's behind a barrier somehow so that Google should not index it anyway. Well, Google can index it now, right? Since a month or so, they use WebKits to crawl the internet. So they should be able to crawl the content there, but I don't expect that they know what buttons they need to click in order to get through the application, right? For that, they still need to develop a bot and some kind of tags or whatever. So yeah, let's mix it up. Actually, I think both worlds can benefit from each other, right? We can have still a content-driven website that is still containing some application stuff, right? So maybe we have a huge content site that is having tons of pages, but on the top we have a search widget where we can search the page or something, and it goes to an index and gives some result, and the results should be very dynamic and everything. So do you really want to go and do this all with jQuery and modify some DOM there and all this? If you want to have a real nice application widget, it would also be nice to use an application framework like Angular. And something else, like another example, is like a store locator widget, right? If you have on a content site and you want to have an application where you can search for the stores, and you have Google Maps and all these kind of stuff. So for this, it really makes sense to mix it up, right? To have a content-driven website, but with some application widgets. So the first thing we should look at is Angular Bootstrap. Well, not Angular Bootstrap, the bootstrap of Angular. Do you know Bootstrap? The term bootstrap is like the straps on a boot, right? If you want to get into a shoe. So the handles, so you can grab them and get in, right? And this was adopted by IT and by some technical terms, that when you want to bootstrap a machine or bootstrap a system, it's basically starting the system or making the system start itself, right? So like the handles on a boot. Yeah, funny. Stories. Yeah. Yeah, it's Swiss joke. So somebody told me I need to be narrative when I do a presentation. So I told you this boot stuff. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so let's look at this. This is basically the most simple application that you can build with Angular, right? You don't even need some JavaScript code to run this. Well, you should fill in something for name, but you look at this and you immediately know what's going on. So before I show you this, or we go through this example here, I would like to show you something on the console. So this is a manual bootstrap with Angular. So this is actually what is happening under the hood if you do ng app. So right here we have data ng boot. We could name this anything basically. And here we use jQuery for convenience reason. I don't like jQuery anymore since browser became very powerful, and we don't need to use jQuery for everything. I mean, this could be done with 2 or 3 more lines of native DOM API, but for convenience reason, I use jQuery here. So yeah, but before we go into that, I would like to show you something. Let's go to JSBin. And let's put something here. Test. Let's add jQuery. Angular has also a promoted place somewhere here. Here. Okay. And then let's put this in a div. All right, let's hide this. And yeah, that's it's cooler to do it in the real console. Okay, so now let's go to the body div. Okay, do we have Angular? Yes, that's the cool thing about the console. Did you know, that's cool, by the way. Let me zoom in, or can you see it properly? Yeah, can you read it? Okay. So that's a cool feature of the Chrome DevTools. Whenever you select an element, you can use $0 and it's pointing to the DOM element. So you will get reference to the DOM element. So you don't need to select the classes and everything. You can just click on it and do wrapping this into a function that requires a DOM element. You can just use $0 as variable. Pretty cool. Okay, I'm done. This was the presentation. No. Yeah, $0. Yeah, no. Okay, so seriously, let me show you something. So now we do Angular.element. This is the thing I want to show you. And we say $0. Yeah, great, huh? Yeah, of course, I'm writing stupid stuff here. And actually, that's not even what I want to show you. I want to show you something else, of course, first. Bootstrap. Yeah, they have Bootstrap already inside of Angular when you... So Bootstrap is the API from Angular to manually bootstrap Angular on a specific DOM element. So instead of doing an auto bootstrap where you just put an ng app somewhere, you're gonna manually bootstrap it with Angular.bootstrap, and then what you do is you pass in the DOM element. In this case, we can use $0, and actually that's already it. If you do it, it would work, but let's do something else first. Let's create a module. And let's do a run here. And writing on one line is so creepy. So creepy. $root scope. Test. Okay, no errors. Angular.bootstrap. Okay, so the first argument is our DOM element. And the second argument is a list of modules that we want to put into the dependency injection registry and link to this application that we bootstrap there. So here what we put now, of course, is our module test module, and it works. So we've bootstrapped Angular here. Yeah, please. No, so that's pretty awesome, right? We can manually bootstrap Angular by creating our own data attributes or attributes and then bootstrapping it there. So yeah, now you might think like, okay, why? Why should I do this? I have ng app, right? Why should I create my own attribute and do it manually? Sorry, I didn't go through this example. I wanted to show you this GIF because I really like it. No, so actually the example, it's doing exactly what we did, except that it's using kind of a declarative way to do it, right? So we specify a data attribute, data ng boot, and inside of the data attribute we store the module name that we want to boot Angular with on this specific element. And then inside of our of this function here, what we do is for each of the elements on the page we have with data ng boot, we're going to bootstrap Angular, and in the module array we just gonna we're gonna say, okay, data ng boot, so we're gonna read what's here and put it into the module dependency. So yeah, again, why? So that's one reason. We can have multiple apps per page. So the standard way, when you do ng app, you cannot have multiple ng apps on one page, right? This will not work. Angular will prevent it. Although Angular is prepared for something like this. You can, without any issues, have multiple Angular applications on the page. However, they wanted to prevent it by the auto bootstrap mechanism because you can easily mess it up. So if you have two apps nested, then you will have a problem. But if you have them on the same level or even above, then it's no problem. So yeah, you can do something like this. You can have a body, and inside of the body you have a section, and there you have data ng boot widget 1 and data ng boot widget 2, which both of them are modules, and then you can bootstrap two Angular applications. And if you would do that with this JavaScript code, then you would actually see two different messages in these spaces. Yeah, I mean, that's clear. But what I wanted to make sure here is that, I mean, I could even use the same module. It doesn't really matter because the instances of the module, they will be allocated in kind of the dependency registry that is bound to the root scope and root element of the application, which is bootstrapped twice, actually. So I have really an individual application running there. So even if I have a service which all the Angular artifacts, once they're instances, they're singletons, right? Except the controller of the controller. But like a factory or a service or a value, they're all singletons. They only exist one time in your whole application. But with this, they will exist two times, actually. One in one application and the other one in the other one. And they have a different state, of course. So yeah, and that's another reason why you should probably do it if you have only application widgets. And I think you have been talking about this before I heard the discussion. So, I mean, Angular even minified with $resource and maybe some other modules you want to add, you easily get over 150K, right, with JavaScript. And if you only have like small widgets on maybe only some pages of your 3,000 content pages, why would you load this library on each page and this module with this 150K? So there, it probably makes sense to use a manual bootstrapping mechanism that you kind of tweak for your requirements. And this is actually what you would want to do if you would produce an application like this. So in here, this looks exactly like before, except one thing. We're gonna have our module name here in data ngboot, and then we will use a colon to separate this module name from a URL with a JavaScript file where our module actually lives. And the logic for this, it even fits on one page. I scaled down the font a little bit, but it fits on one page. So actually this script is almost the same like before, with the difference that it will load these modules while it discovers this data attributes. And it will also load Angular the first time it discovers one of these attributes. So with this code, you already have a dynamic bootstrapping mechanism that allows you only to specify data attributes on some elements on a page. And this mechanism will load Angular first if it's not existing already. And then it will load your module based on the string you pass in this data attribute. So to explain it a little bit, so we also iterate over all data ngboot elements, attributes or elements with these attributes. And then here we're gonna just put aside the element. We're gonna split the data value by column. So we're gonna have in the first one the module name, and in the second array element will be the file that we want to load. And then we use lab.js, which is a asynchronous script loader. You can also load other scripts with that, and you can queue up script loads, and then you can wait for a few scripts to load. And it's really handy when you need to load script asynchronously and have control over it, because just using async attribute in your script tag in HTML is nice, but yeah, you don't have any control over it. You don't know which one will be loaded first and if they're loaded in sequence and all these kind of things. So if you need to load them in sequence and maybe also wait for some scripts to load until you continue, you should use lab.js. There is also YapNope, but they discontinued the support, and they use YapNope is used in Modernizer, for example, to load shims on the go. They also suggest to use lab.js now. And yeah, so what we do is we check if Angular is already present in window, and if not, we're just gonna return this URL with Angular, and lab.js will load Angular for us. Until it's loaded, it will wait, and after it's loaded, it will execute this function where we actually load all the module that we have specified, and until when that is loaded, we're just gonna bootstrap like before. We're gonna bootstrap Angular. And of course, we can also take a look, hopefully. Okay, you see the small blip, right? You see that the template strings are visible for a moment and then they disappear. But actually, in Plonker, I usually use JSBin, but Plonker you can have kind of virtual files you can put here, which is quite cool if you want to load files to test something. So here we have widget1.js, which is just an immediately invoke function expression and an Angular module. With a run function where we inject root scope, and on the root scope we set name to async loaded widget1, and we do the same thing here just with another module name and another message. And inside of our script, this is exactly what you saw before, not modified. It's really this. We load Angular. If it's not already loaded, we wait until it's loaded, and then we're gonna load our module. And we do this for all elements that contain data ngboot. And if we go to our HTML, you can see there is no Angular inside here. There is no reference to our modules. We simply include our script that contains the declarative API that we can use with data attributes. And then we're gonna specify them here, and lab.js will do the rest. So we can even maybe another panel. If we're gonna check out what's happening here. Wait. Okay, so you can see jQuery LabJS in the head, they block. Then we load script, the last blocking one, and then you can see Angular is loaded. And you see the initiator is yeah, the initiator is actually the script, the LabJS script, so it's really loaded asynchronously after DOM ready. And then widget 1 is loaded, and then widget 2 is loaded. So you can see it's almost nothing, right? This little script, we have already an asynchronous handling of our widgets. We can bootstrap multiple widgets on our page. And this script will load Angular for us and the script module. Cool. Okay, so that's one thing, right? You want to maybe achieve with widgets. You want to have multiple widgets, maybe only one, maybe a few on your page, and the file size should be, they maybe should be loaded asynchronously. But something else you want to achieve, which is quite handy for a lot of use cases, is, yeah? Oh, sorry.
I was just thinking, how much work is Angular doing when you call the boost? Expensive to do that 10 times and once?
Yeah, it's definitely more expensive than do it just once. But actually, Angular, what it does, it's similar like compiling a directive, right? It calls $compile and does all this stuff, so it's not so expensive, right?
Yeah, and you would have to do it anyway if I had my 10 widgets in just one application.
Yes, it compiles the directive, so it's not so much of a difference. The only thing is you have another dependency injection registry with all the instances, so you're going to have a little bit more memory consumption and these kind of things. And also you have like these async queues for async stuff, for the dirty checking and everything. So there is kind of a performance overhead. But if you don't end up like with 1,000 widgets, I would say it's still fine if you have 3 or 4 widgets on a page. So yeah. This is another thing you might want to do, right? Access Angular from the outside, because, okay, you have your widgets, but maybe you want to control them from outside of Angular. So you want to get into a widget and do something inside of the widget, right? And for this, Angular is prepared as well. I mean, that's really beautiful about Angular. The more you work with Angular, you're going to recognize they have really done everything so simple, and you can do everything you like. And you have really everything available. I mean, and even for testing and all this, it's really amazing. So yeah, I'm really in love with Angular. I could talk endlessly about that. Yeah, so again, our very simple application. And before we do this, I want to go to JSBin again. And now I want to do more like a regular app. Like this. Did you guys do live coding in front of an audience once? You feel like a 7-year-old who never developed, and you kind of sit here and, well, what's the command again? You used it 1,000 times, but yeah, it's really, you get used to it somehow, but it's still crappy.
Especially in front of you, they are also.
Yeah, then it's, yes, exactly. And if I don't know it, they will know it, I'm sure. So I will be very, and that's a sickness we all have, right? We don't want to fail. We don't want to be incorrect about our knowledge, right? Our knowledge is our kingdom and wisdom, and it's really, really.
You can still see the.
Yeah, that's true. No, but actually, I think we should really learn to, to mistakes are fine. I mean, we can't know everything. We simply can't. There is so much stuff now in the web. So next time you just say, okay, I didn't know that one, but I know a lot of other stuff. So don't worry. Okay, module my app. I just lost the thread and I wanted to distract you, but okay. What did I want to do? What did I want to do? Ah, yeah, again, the same thing. So here we're gonna make a run function $root scope, and this time I have multiple lines. Yeah, $root scope dot hello Angular Meetup. Don't complain, JS. All right, so that should already work. No. Why? Oh, yeah. Ah, see? That's what I meant. Now you think I'm a rookie, you know. I forgot the declaration. No. Okay. Yeah, so let me detach this one. Get into the real console again. Okay. So here we are, and we have a bootstrapped Angular application. It's already running with the standard way, right? We have ng-app, my app, and the directive or the app is already compiled. We see the compiled stuff here. So now we want to access this app from jQuery or somewhere from anywhere on the page, right? So for this, Angular has also some methods. So we can use Angular.element. And in here we can say $0 again, because we have it selected, right? The element that we want to use. And I did the same mistake as before. Okay, so now I have element. And it looks like a jQuery wrapper, right? It is an array with my DOM elements. And but it's a bit more. I mean, you probably all know, right? Angular is using internally kind of jQuery to wrap the objects and do DOM manipulation. And if you don't load jQuery, it will use an integrated jQuery version, JQLite, which is a very, very small jQuery with only the basic stuff. But if Angular gets loaded and jQuery is already on the class path, oh my God, I'm falling back to Java. It's already in the window object. Then it takes the real jQuery version. So now this is a jQuery wrapper actually, but I have more on this element. So what I have here is, for example, controller. I can check what controller is attached to my element. I have an injector for my current application that is bootstrapped there. I can get the injector of this application, which is really awesome. I can show you later what you can do with that. I can get the isolate scope if there is an isolate scope, if it's a directive with an isolate scope. I can even modify the isolate scope, which is pretty cool. And I can look up the scope. So scope is pretty simple. I just call it as a function. It will return the scope. It's a getter. And on my scope, on my scope, I get the scope. I can access my scope variables. So you can see I can access, this is all from outside, right? I'm not in Angular here. I just used Angular.element to get an element from Angular, and on the element I can call .scope and I get the scope back from this message. From this variable. Okay, so one other thing is, if I want to set, of course, something in the scope, I can do so. Hello, Carlos, for example. So if I do this, my variable is set, but my controller or my directive or my application is not compiled, right? So why is that? Wow, yeah, no digest. Cool. So how can we do a digest? I mean, it's the same if you have an event that comes from outside of Angular, right? You need to perform a digest. So I can just get my scope. As usual, I do $digest. And as soon as I digest, the message is updated. So this is exactly the same like you would do it inside of Angular when you have a callback from an event or something like this. You also perform these kind of tasks, right? You set something in the scope, you digest, and then everything gets updated. So this is already the very basics you need to know in order to make a multi-app application, single-page app with, or a content-driven website with a lot of single applications on their page. One other thing I can show you quickly is the injector. So on the injector, what you can do here is you can get the dependency management injector that allows you to receive stuff from within your module, actually, within your running instance, right? So if I just invoke this function, you can see I receive an object, which is kind of the, how is it called, like this revealing module pattern, right? When you have your functions inside of a closure and then you return an object with functions on the objects that refer to these. So this is exactly what it is, right? We have an object, and on this object we can use some methods from Angular inside of this context. So we have invoke, instantiate, get, annotate, and has. And get is probably the one that you're looking for when you want to get something out of this running thing. But the problem is now we don't have something in our module, right? We have only a run. So let's put something here. Test. Hey there. Let's also use it here. Here. Oops. Hey there. Okay, so now I can, I need to make the element first. Injector. So now I can do .get, and here I can just specify the thing that I want to inject or get from the injector. So if I do this, I receive the value. You can do this with factories, with services, with everything you want to call from outside of Angular. So a good practice is actually to make like a service as an API that you want to use from outside, and yet there you have your methods. And then you use the injector to get it out of the app, and then you call your stuff there. You can also, there is also an invoke. Invoke, and then you can just pass a function which will go through the dependency management of Angular and do dependency injection. So here you can say then your function is executed. You can put any dependencies that are there in the module that you specified in this running application, and you will get them out. Yeah. Okay. Are you bored of this, or should I show you something else? Okay. Okay, so because Angular is so awesome, I show you this. So Angular even works without a running application. So you can bootstrap Angular headless without a running root element, without anything on your page, actually. And you could build a whole application with services and factories without HTML. Just an application architecture. And use Angular as an application architecture. And for this, what you can do is they have, let's say, injector equals. They have an injector on Angular as well. So here you can also say injector, and the injector wants you to pass it some dependencies. And here they're very, very strict about that, and I really like that because it really reflects how clean the architecture of Angular is. If I do this, and if I then say injector.get, and let's say I want to use the queue promises from Angular outside of Angular. So I could say here injector.get $q, and I will have a fully working queue promise. But if I do this now, it will give me an error. Okay, I don't have a dependency, or a dependency is missing. So that's actually looks bad, but it's really cool because Angular here really requires me to even specify the core module. Without not specifying the core module as dependencies, I don't have any dependencies from Angular. So I could even build my own Angular architecture application without the core modules, only with my own modules. But let's do it like this. If I do it like this, I can now really say get, and I can say $q, and oops, that was going to void. $q equals this, and then I can say $q. Let's see if I can do that here. Q.defer $q promise, then function console log. D.resolve. Yes, works. So you can really get everything from Angular. Even $HTTP works. You can get $H. I don't know if you want that because it doesn't make sense without Angular, but you could even get $HTTP or the $browser in there. There is also cool stuff for cookie management and things like this. So you could also get that and do something with it. Although it's maybe not a good idea that you even from the outside get some Angular core modules and do stuff there. I mean, it's kind of a weird dependency that you have then, but just to mess around a little bit and do a presentation, it's really nice. Yeah, okay, so. Okay, so this example is nothing else than we just saw in the browser. So what we do is we have a simple Angular module, my app. We have a value name, world as a value. Then we do Angular.element, and we get our NGApp element with this attribute selector, NGApp equals my app, which is the root element. And then we do a set timeout. After 2 seconds, we're gonna get element.scope and set message, perform a digest. And then after 4 seconds, what we do is we get from the injector, we get name, which is our value here. We reverse it and we set our scope message to welcome and then the reversed variable, and then we perform a digest. And if you look at this, it simply looks like this: no message, test, and then welcome lorv. Yeah, it's really simple, but you can see it's really easy to access Angular from the outside, and I think it's really, really cool. Yeah, so now this is the thing I discussed before a little bit. So you might want to also call, or that your widgets can communicate with each other, right? We had, for example, we had a use case at a customer. I asked the customer, I can tell his name, it's Zurich Insurance. And they had, for example, they have a pretty complex search application or search system around their whole website. So you have filters for their tag filters on the left column somewhere down, and then you have a search field on the top right, and something else where you can add some more tags or something on a completely different spot. And again, this is one page out of, I think, 4,000 Zurich insurance. And you don't want to have Angular all the time. So it's in that case, it makes sense to use something like this. And there, you also want to communicate between your widgets, right? So one widget should really tell the other widget, hey, now I have a tag selected, so please update your search or whatever, and establish a communication channel. So just to look at the architecture a little bit when you have two running applications, Angular applications. So instead of having one dependency injection registry, you really have two registries. And if you use the same service function, let's say, in both of your modules, and you use them differently, they will have a different state. They really exist in parallel. And you will have two different root elements and two different root scopes. So usually you have one root scope, right? But in this case, you will have two root scopes, of course, which is where the root element sits. And to illustrate this, I made a really quick and dirty example here of two widgets that are communicating with each other. And I can show you this example is really, that's all the code you need for this example. So here I can type something, and these two boxes, they're individual apps. They're not in the same app context, they're really booted totally differently. So here I can send a message over, I can send a message back, and so on and so forth. Oops, yeah, you know this problem, right? Now it's not working anymore. Track by index, yeah, I don't know how this is solved in Angular 2. I didn't look at Angular 2 so closely, but I think it's also not so easy to look at it. You need to go through all the GitHub stuff, and yeah, but this is something I think they solved there. But to look at the code, what's going on here to communicate between two widgets, it's really not complicated. So what we do is we create a controller function. And this is only the function, so we can share it across a lot of modules. It doesn't matter, it's the function, it's not the instance, right? So we create it only one time, but we use it in both of our modules. And here in the function, what we do is it's a controller, so we're gonna use scope here for simplicity purpose. And on the scope, we register a function send message. And this send message function requires a parameter that is the alien root element ID. So the root element of the other application, the ID of that element, the ID attribute on this element. And then what we do inside here is we get the alien root scope, so the other application's root scope, by simply executing angular.element, and we're going to prepend it with a hash, so it's an ID selector, and we're going to select this specific element. And then after that, we get the scope with $scope. And yeah, that's already it. So like this, we can call the function with the ID of a different module or a different widget, and then we get the root scope and we can start communicate. So in this example, we just ensure that in this other alien scope that there is a remote messages array. If there isn't, we're gonna put one. And then we're just gonna push an element into this array with our own message that we have in our own scope. And then we're gonna use alien root scope eval async in order to perform a digest. So I read about it like maybe 2 hours. I read about this function, and I still don't understand it completely, how it works, because it's something to do with the rendering and compilation pipeline of directives. And somehow, you know, when the directive is compiling, at some point it's kind of in the pre-render stage when the browser starts to render it. And at that stage, your digest cycle needs to be over so that it can perform a render. And after that, it will perform this same loop again, right? After digest, and then do all the updates, perform all the digests until there are no changes anymore in the scope, and then it performs a render. And somehow, usually what we do is, also I did this all the time, is if I update something like from an event, I use $digest, but then at some point you're going to run into digest already in progress error message, right? This is usually what you have when there is already a digest and then you perform another one. You quickly run into this problem. So to solve it, if you research, you're going to find, okay, you need to use $timeout and then pass a function and do your stuff inside there, because then Angular will do this thing just in a fresh cycle where it's not performing a digest. So there, what I learned is that $timeout, if you use $timeout even with 0 milliseconds, of course it goes to the event queue because it's using a regular timeout, which is going to the event queue. But then the other thing is, I'm not even sure about this, because they introduced this async queues, which is something they eval before the rendering, and it's really weird. But the main difference is with $timeout, it could be that you're gonna have a rendering cycle before your stuff is updated in the scope, and here when you do eval async, it's more likely that your change is gonna be in the scope and digested before the render. So it's just faster if you do it like this. But you can also try to figure out, I mean, it's really hard to follow this. There are tons of discussion, and Mishko tells something and somebody else tells something. It's really hard to follow. Anyway, it's like $digest, so yeah, long story short. Okay, so here we're gonna instantiate these two modules with our controller, and we have the same boot mechanism here. And this is already it. I mean, this is what this application is. Just, yeah, now it's not working anymore. Just very, very easy module to make them communicate. Okay, so this is actually very crappy communication, right? Because you rely on the ID of the other module, and you have a dependency, a hard dependency on that component, right? Or on that widget, and maybe the widget is not even there, right? And you start to say, come on, take this message, and it's not there, and yeah, you know, this is kind of a crappy mechanism. And we should really do it like with a pops up mechanism, right? With a publish subscribe mechanism, where subscribers, they can subscribe for kind of a message type, let's say news, and then whenever somebody publishes something to the message hub with this type, all the subscribers will pull the message or get the message. And in order to do this exactly with this example, it's actually not a lot more code. The big code part is the message hub, but you could use anything as a message hub or an event or something like this. But here we have 3 apps now, so kind of 3 widgets, where, yeah, it's kind of a persona, right? So we have a sporty widget, we have a usual widget, and we have a geeky widget, and they all can chat about stuff in a category, and they will only receive stuff that they think it's interesting for them. So let's say the sporty guy is talking about food, the usual guy is talking about music, and the geek about computers. So if we say, okay, something, or I love apples, whatever. So you can see that the usual guy and the sporty guy received the message because they're both interested in food. So if this one says, do you know whatever? You can see, oh, okay, the sporty guy is not so interested in movies. And this is really, you can even see that it's delayed sometimes a little bit for both of the apps. And if you pick a very generic thing, music for everybody receives it. So like this, if we look at the code quickly, how this is done, we just have a message hop, and this message hop is a constructor here. So in this message hop constructor, what we do is we have subscriptions. It's a object, and an empty object, and in the subscriptions we can register ourselves to be or subscribe to some stuff, to some messages. So when we do that, we call a function subscribe. We pass a type, what do we want to subscribe for, and the scope, which is our scope. And then what we do is we gonna just, okay, if it's an array of types, I can also say I'm interested in a lot of things at the same time. And then we're gonna push this into this object so we can track all these subscriptions. And on the other side, we have a publish function. And in this publish function, we pass the sender scope, a type and a message. And then all we do is we check, do we have any subscriptions for this particular type? And if yes, then we're gonna send the message to this subscriber with our sender scope so that we can have kind of a answer to the message, and the type and a message, we're gonna just push this into the sender and do a eval async. And this already gives us this thing which should actually be our end goal on a content-driven site when we want to have widgets. Kind of dynamic widgets that are loaded asynchronously and that can communicate to each other without knowing about each other, right? Which is why pops up pattern is here. So yeah, this is, I mean, that's what I prepared. So if you have any questions about this now from what you saw, we can talk about. Or is this even the last slide? Yeah, it is. So yeah, thanks a lot for being here. And if you have any questions, please ask them now so we can discuss about it. Yes. Yes. Sure, yeah. I can. I was even allowed to. I asked if I can, so. Okay, so this is actually the landing page of Zurich Insurance. And unfortunately, this widget thing is not there yet. Although we use the mechanism for only one widget, which is the location finder. And you can access the location finder with this button here. And it will pop out this location finder that is all done in AngularJS. And we don't load AngularJS and we don't load this finder application until you are on this page. And it's not done via a script that is only put into the HTML on this page. It's done with this declarative API where we use data boot. We use data ng boot. And here, I mean, you can search for for a post lights all, or you can say, okay, I want to search for stuff in Zurich, and it needs to be 8003, and then you can look into this locations and explore them more here. Or you can also just browse through the map and check out which one you want to go to, which I usually do. Yeah, so it's nothing fancy, but if you look at the code, you can see that we also use this custom bootstrap here. So, okay, that's two. So here you can see we have data ng boot. And then you can see we have a comma separated list of scripts. It's done here a little bit differently than in my example, but it's the same concept. loading files asynchronously and then bootstrapping Angular. And here we use a config data attribute to communicate into the module to pass it some configuration. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's always hard to answer what's the best practice, right? Because it's always depending so much on the context. How many is this application visible when you visit the page already or not? Can the user click somewhere and then it's visible? I mean, if it's something like this, I would recommend load it when the page loads asynchronously, because then it loads in the background and when the user clicks, it's already loaded, right? But if it's something that is already there, visible, you need to have another mechanism, right? Maybe you can page your data and ship it in fragments, or I mean, I'm not sure if I can tell you really some best practices there, but I would have some ideas at least how you could solve it. I mean, but in this case, what we do is it's 300 locations, and we just put it into the client from when the page loads. When this page with the finder loads, because we see that the user still needs like few seconds to realize that the finder is here, and then he needs to open it, and until this happens, the locations are already loaded. So here we do it like this. But I mean, it's a tricky question, when to load what, and should, I mean, then you read, since ever Yahoo said best practice is that we have one script and one CSS, and that one script is loaded or is put the script tag at the end of the, or just before body close. Since then, everybody is like, okay, one script, we have only 6 requests that can be open in parallel to the same origin, right? So that was the reason for this, right? We can only have 6 connections. So if we can have more, why not have more scripts, right? If the scripts can already do something on their own independently and add some value to the user, and we can have infinite amount of connections, why shouldn't we put all the scripts that we have in separate requests, right? So that's the only thing, because of the origin restriction, right? And now with because it's slow, yeah, that's true.
So it depends really on.
Exactly. And this I mean, you know, the DNS lookup, and okay, that's cached, but the initial network protocol that you have, okay, it's there, but how does it matter in the perceived performance when you look into a page that slowly starts to build up, right? That's true. On 3G, exactly, you see it. It's so much depending on the context. So hard to talk about this, but in general, if you look at your specific use case and take all your kind of environmental constraints, like does it need to work on mobile, right? That's valid if it needs to work on mobile properly. I recently did a performance enhancement for a client, and I've been through all the way, like also critical CSS, inlining critical CSS, loading all scripts asynchronously, all these kind of things. And then you have the flash of unstyled font and flash of unstyled content, and then the customer is complaining about that, you know, and there is no perfect solution. There is just one of the best solution you can have for the specific context. But yeah, in terms of widgets on a page, especially when you have multiple widgets, I would say it makes a lot of sense to load them as they on the demand, actually, on demand. Sorry, did I answer you? No, I don't think so. Mm-hmm.
That's something that Jake.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's Angular location. You can, while you're doing digest with stuff, you can update your URL. That's yes. Yeah. But here we are not using, I mean, we use a state in the URL, but we're not using $route as we should basically use it. We use only route provider to check if the URL has changed. And otherwise we use locate $locator or locator provider or something like this in order to update the hash URL, yeah. But the state is, I mean, yeah, it's not so representative, but at least to some degree it's fine. We have also some edge cases, you know, which is kind of terrible, but it is like that. So we have like so the thing is here you see local results. I kind of use the term offline online search. So we load all the locations into the Finder and then you perform an offline search. That's why it's so fast, right? So you say, okay, 8003, and then you already see the result, right? Which is pretty fast. And even Google Maps does, if it's close enough, it does zoom in and zoom out and all this. So on the go, so it's really cool. But and you can also, you know, I say, okay, I don't want a help point, or I want to activate the help point. But the thing here is it's still an offline search, but then we face the problem where a user enters something that does not exist in the local search. And then we need to suggest him what he probably wants to have as a result. So what's a good example? Affoltern, for example. So Affoltern, we have a result. But the problem is maybe that's not the only result that we want to have, right? So maybe that agency is and Affoltern am Albis, and we meant Affoltern Zürich, right? So that's not implemented right now, but actually what we do is in the new version that's coming out next Wednesday, I think, is that there will be suggestions from Google then. So after a few milliseconds, we will also do a request to Google Maps in order to get an additional location list for search terms inside of Switzerland. And then we will provide some more details where the user can say, okay, I didn't meant this one, so I meant that one. And then you click on it, and then we do a distance search. So we go to this location on the map. This is all happening in the client in Google Maps. You have a coordinate system. You can navigate locally on the client, which is awesome, kind of. And then what we do is from this location, we just search the offline, the 10 closest locations from this point and display them. So there is quite some logic behind that. But as I said, I think Angular is here. I think it's Angular 1.2.16 or so, we're a little bit behind. And it's like 110 kilo or something. And then this app is also like 30 kilo. So instead of loading this in our regular scripts, we just use this widget mechanism to load it asynchronous. And of course, you could also with lab.js, for example, you can have a status and then you say, okay, your widgets on the page, they receive kind of a spinning wheel, our favorite spinning wheel, right? And then once it's loaded, you can reveal the stuff there. So you can make it a little bit more attractive in terms of the experience. Yes? More question? Yes? Sure.
Okay. Google can parse.
Yeah, Google, they use headless WebKits now to crawl the internet. So they use a full-fledged JavaScript engine to crawl your website. So, I mean, currently the thing is they have done this, but they don't know yet what to do with it. The only thing what they do right now, as far as I know, I mean, I'm not 100% sure of this. This is not scientific, what I tell you here. But is that they use it also for stuff that is very obvious, like runtime performance, for example. If they see that you load scripts asynchronously and you're fast with this, they probably gonna rank you better than somebody who is not loading them asynchronously, for example. And they really use metrics, how long it takes to get the DOM ready. And then based on that, they gonna rate you higher than somebody that has not such a fast DOM ready. That's what they do, for sure. I don't think so, because I mean, anyway, what you deliver to the web is open to everybody to inspect and digest, right? Everybody can go to your website and read your JavaScript. They can beautify it and read it, right? If they're really crazy. Yeah. But I mean, that's always like security in the front end. I always think, yeah, what kind of security in the front end do you need? Because the goal is that the front end is at the client and he can do anything with it. I mean, he can inspect the JavaScript, whatever he wants. So you should not need any security in the front end. And if you have, then it's more like you just talk about security, but in the end, it's a passive security mechanism, right? You have a cookie, or you have an SSO, yeah, like a SAML or OpenID where it's happening over the cookie, right? But yeah, Google is able to, I mean, it's also scary, right? They have JavaScript crawlers now. They execute everything. It's kind of scary, but it's like that. And I think for us as single app developers, it's really cool, right? Because I'm sure it will be in maybe half a year or so where they will publish a JavaScript client API where we can say, okay, if you're on this page, this is very important, this is very important, click here to see the results, blah, blah, blah. And then they will index this, of course. Yes, of course. I mean, if you're interested about Russia and Yandex and all these kind of search engines, and then of course not. And Bing, I never use Bing, but yeah. Yeah, that's true. Google is the only search engine that does that at the moment. But it's a logical step, right? We go from more and more to JavaScript. I mean, even screen readers, they understand perfectly JavaScript, right? Everybody who I go to and he's writing some no-script text, I look at him and say, why are you writing no-script? For who, you know? Yeah, but like for images maybe, for Yandex and Bling, and until they get ready. But to make a headless Internet Explorer, I think they will have a hard time until they have a headless Internet Explorer. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah, let's go back to this slide because I need to make a little bit advertisement as well. So yeah, as I said, I also do coaching with AngularJS, but also with JavaScript and architecture, build process, all these kind of things. So if you need only a review maybe to get some new ideas, or you can hire me for that. Yeah, thanks.